I want you to imagine spending years building something with your own hands, working overtime, skipping vacations, saying no to things you wanted because you had a bigger goal. Then one afternoon, you walk into a family gathering expecting a normal conversation and discover that your parents have already sold your house to pay for your brother's dream vacation. And somehow, the most shocking part wasn't that they did it. It was that they expected me to thank them. Trust me, when I tell you what happened next, you're going to think it sounds impossible. Because while my parents were sitting there celebrating what they thought was a done deal, I was holding a folder. A simple blue folder. And inside that folder was everything they never bothered to check, everything they assumed didn't exist. Everything that would turn their victory into the biggest mistake of their lives. But before I tell you why that folder changed everything, you need to understand how my family worked. Because favoritism doesn't usually happen overnight. It grows slowly, quietly, like rust. And by the time you finally notice it, the damage is already everywhere. Growing up, my younger brother Kyle was the golden child. If he got a C in school, my parents praised his effort. If I got an A, they asked why it wasn't an A+. If he quit something, he was finding himself. If I struggled, I was being irresponsible. For years, I convinced myself I was imagining it. Because nobody wants to believe their parents have favorites. But eventually, reality becomes impossible to ignore. Now, I wasn't a perfect kid. I made mistakes. Everybody does. But one thing I always had was discipline. And honestly, a huge part of that came from fitness. While other teenagers spent weekends partying, I was waking up early to train. At first, it was about sports. Then it became something deeper. The gym taught me a lesson my family never could. Effort matters. Consistency matters. Accountability matters. The barbell never cared about excuses. And over time, that mindset started shaping my entire life. While Kyle jumped from one expensive hobby to another, I worked. While he spent money, I saved it. While he waited for opportunities, I built them. By the time I turned 32, I had purchased a small house completely on my own. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. Every payment, every repair, every improvement. Mine. Honestly, buying that house was one of the proudest moments of my life. Because it represented independence, freedom, proof that all those years of discipline meant something. My parents barely congratulated me. Meanwhile, when Kyle financed a luxury SUV he couldn't afford, they threw him a party. That should have told me everything. Now Kyle had a habit of making bad financial decisions. Expensive trips, expensive gadgets, expensive lifestyles. He always seemed to believe money would magically appear whenever he needed it, and unfortunately, my parents spent years proving him right. Every time he got into trouble, they rescued him. Every time he overspent, they covered the difference. Every time reality showed up, they shielded him from consequences. Now eventually, that lifestyle caught up to him. One day he announced he wanted to take a 6-month luxury trip around Europe. Not a budget vacation. Not a reasonable getaway. A social media fantasy adventure costing more money than most people earn in a year. And predictably, he couldn't afford it. Any normal adult would either save for it or cancel it. Kyle did neither. Instead, he went to my parents. And somehow, they decided my property was the solution. Now let me explain something. A few years earlier, I had allowed my parents temporary access to some paperwork related to my house while I was traveling for work. It seemed harmless at the time. A simple administrative convenience. Big mistake. Because some people mistake access for ownership. Now, one Saturday afternoon, my mother called and insisted I attend a family dinner. Her tone sounded strange, almost excited. I should have trusted my instincts. But I went anyway. The atmosphere felt weird from the moment I arrived. Everybody looked unusually cheerful. Kyle especially. The kind of cheerful that only comes from believing you've already won. Dinner went normally for about 20 minutes. Then, my father stood up, raised his glass, and announced Kyle's upcoming European adventure. Everybody applauded. Everybody smiled. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. He thanked the family for coming together to make it happen. I remember looking around, confused. Then my mother smiled proudly and said, "Your house finally served a real purpose." Honestly, for a second I thought I misheard her. I actually laughed. Because the statement sounded so absurd. Then, Kyle grinned. And that's when I knew. Something was very wrong. I asked what they meant. My father leaned back in his chair like he was delivering good news. Then he explained that they had already arranged the sale. The paperwork was moving forward. The money would fund Kyle's trip. And according to them, I should be happy because family helps family. I wish I could tell you I exploded. I wish I could tell you I screamed. But honestly, I smiled. That's all I did. I smiled, and suddenly the room became confused. Because that wasn't the reaction they expected. They expected panic, anger, begging. Instead, I calmly reached into my bag, pulled out a blue folder, and placed it on the table. The moment that folder touched the wood, everything changed. Now here's something fitness taught me that applies far beyond the gym. Preparation beats emotion. Every single time. When people rely on assumptions, disciplined people rely on facts. Months earlier, I had noticed strange behavior. Questions about property values. Questions about ownership documents. Questions that seemed oddly specific. So I started reviewing everything carefully. And what I discovered made me uncomfortable enough to prepare for the worst. Inside that folder were certified copies of every relevant document, ownership records, legal agreements, updated filings, trust paperwork, everything. Because unlike my parents, I actually read what I signed. Now, my father opened the folder confidently. That confidence lasted about 30 seconds. Then his face changed. Kyle stopped smiling. My mother went completely silent. Because the property they thought they sold wasn't legally available to sell. Months earlier, after noticing suspicious behavior, I had transferred ownership protections and updated all legal structures through proper channels. Every single action they attempted depended on outdated assumptions. The sale couldn't proceed, the agreement wasn't valid, the transaction was effectively worthless, and the buyers were already demanding explanations. Honestly, the silence was incredible. For years I had been the family member everyone underestimated. And now suddenly they were realizing they had never understood me at all. My father started arguing immediately, claiming there had been a misunderstanding, claiming they were only trying to help Kyle, claiming family should work together. Funny how people discover the importance of family only after getting caught. Now here's where things became even more interesting, because the folder contained something else. Evidence, emails, messages, conversations, proof that they knew exactly what they were doing. Proof that this wasn't confusion. It wasn't miscommunication. It was a plan. A deliberate plan. And honestly, watching their confidence disappear felt surreal. Not satisfying, not exciting, just surreal. Because deep down, I realized something painful. They genuinely believed I would never defend myself. They genuinely believed I would simply accept whatever happened. That realization hurt more than the attempted sale itself. Now over the following weeks, everything unraveled. The buyers withdrew. Legal questions emerged. Financial consequences followed. And Kyle's dream vacation vanished almost overnight. Suddenly, everybody wanted to talk. Everybody wanted understanding. Everybody wanted forgiveness. But here's something important I've learned through both fitness and life. Boundaries are not punishments, they're protection. When someone repeatedly shows you who they are, boundaries become necessary. Now, I didn't seek revenge. I didn't try to destroy anyone. I simply refused to rescue people from consequences they created themselves. For the first time in my life, I let accountability do its job. And honestly, that was harder than anger. Much harder, because part of me still wanted their approval. Part of me still wanted them to choose me. But eventually you reach a point where self-respect becomes more important than acceptance. Now today, years later, my life looks very different. The house is still mine. The business has grown. My health is better than ever. And perhaps most importantly, I finally understand something I wish I'd learned much earlier. Being related to someone doesn't automatically give them access to your future. Family should support your growth, not exploit it. Family should celebrate your achievements, not sacrifice them for someone else's comfort. And if they don't, you have every right to protect what you've built. I still keep that blue folder, not because I enjoy remembering what happened, but because it reminds me of something important. Preparation matters, discipline matters, and self-respect matters. The same habits that help you build a stronger body can also help you build a stronger life. Because whether you're lifting weights or facing betrayal, the principle stays the same. Stay calm, stay prepared, trust the work you've done, and never underestimate the power of quietly knowing the truth while everyone else is busy celebrating a lie. That night, my parents thought they had won. Kyle thought he was headed to Europe. Everybody thought the story was over. But sometimes the most powerful move isn't arguing. Sometimes it's smiling, opening the folder, and letting the facts speak for themselves.